is now going to talk about how to be a nodule, NPM nodule maintainer. He's really good node module maintainer apparently, so he's going to tell you, he's going to tell you like some tricks, how to be better, how to, deal with the whole open source movement, people asking for things, etc., I suppose. So I'm going to...
Thank you very much. Can I plug this in?
Yes. So I have an announcement I forgot. If anyone here has a venue available for us to move into in like April, that would be great. Because I think lists are turning this space into more office space soon, and so we need another venue. So anyone has a venue proposition? Yes, one hand. Anyone else too? Okay, well please do come and talk to me after this. That'll be awesome. So we can keep delivering pizza and node.js songs. No. Awesome. Alright, here we go. Wait, give it a second. People are like, pizza, English.
Okay, your pizza.
Yo, pizza people. Come back to Papa.
While you guys are getting pizza, I'll just tell you a little bit about my background because it helps to explain why I'm doing this talk a little bit. I've been doing Node for a while. I haven't done any like big production Node projects in a while because I haven't had any jobs that involve that. I mostly do front-end stuff. But my activity in the Node world tends to be sort of like writing useful tools for myself or other people, and doing quick prototypes for myself for little side projects I've done. So I've got a couple of open source projects, one of which is I've got a few active contributors, which is really exciting for me. One of which I'm trying to sort of get a few more active contributors. But I've learned a few things about how to deal with Node projects as open source projects. And that's kind of what I want to share with you guys today, because I think there's probably a few people out there who maybe want to open source their work or want to publish stuff to NPM or never have and they're curious about it. And it's more than just NPM publish. There's a few things that you should know surrounding the process of publishing and maintaining open source Node modules. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. That's the title. And also, just to be clear, there's many ways to do everything, and there's probably going to be some things in here which you think are kind of stupid, and there's probably going to be some things that I'm missing out. So please let me know if you have any good ideas to improve my process, because I do this stuff like many times a month. So it'd be good to have this conversation afterwards. But for now, I'm going to tell you how I do it. It's mostly opinion. And a lot of it's sort of soft skills sort of thing. A bit of technical stuff, a bit of soft skills. So let's just hypothesize. Imagine a scenario where we're developing a Node module, which the purpose of it is to automatically generate a LNUG talk. And it's called Generate LNUG Talk or LNUG Talk Generator or something like that. And we want to make it really great so that everyone uses it, right? So the first thing is think about your target audience. You might be developing a Node module, but that doesn't mean you can't also target it at front-end JavaScript developers. I'm sure a lot of you are front-end JavaScript developers in your spare time or possibly as your full-time jobs, and Node is something you moonlight at. And the truth is that most JavaScript modules you write for Node are probably going to work perfectly fine in the browser, at least in Chrome and Firefox and Safari, and the latest IE. The key thing is that basically sometimes you might have some weird sort of file system type things. Those are the kind of only situations where you want to worry about not targeting browsers. And it's really easy. If you're not familiar with a tool called Browserify, it's the coolest thing in the world. It's developed by this chap called James Halliday, also known as Substack, who was at LNUG a few months ago. And what it'll do is just kind of get your Node code and package it up into a standalone JavaScript module, file, with all the dependencies, all kind of packaged right in. And then you can modify it, which I'm sure all of you have done before, to make it smaller. And just stick that into your repo, and suddenly all of your friends on the front end can use your module. But make sure that all the dependencies in your module are browser safe. So if you're using like FS or anything weird to do with watching files, or basically anything with files I wouldn't do. That's the main thing that I worry about. But even like really popular node modules that you probably would depend on quite a lot. Anyone familiar with Press by Michael Rogers? Like that is browser safe. It's not very well known. In fact, maybe it is, but I only discovered it a couple of weeks ago. You can just stick it in your browser and you can start making AJAX requests, and you don't have to worry about jQuery or any other little libraries anymore. I really like the REST API, so this is a nice thing to do. Yeah, that's a really simple one. Just think about whether you can target more than just node developers. The second thing is README. This is one of my kind of pet peeves. People don't really pay enough attention to writing a good README. It's really important that you do if you are trying to open source your work, or even if you're just doing an NPM module that people are going to use as a dependency. It's really important to write a good README because people don't know anything about you, anything about your module. All they've seen is the name and like a short description, like this is a module that will make an LNUG talk, right? They're going to look at that and they're going to be like, well, I can choose from all these other 50 modules that have written that write LNUG talks for me. How do I know this is the best one, and how am I going to get to use it as quickly as possible? So you have to make sure that your README will say that it's a legit module that does what it says. It's going to tell them how to use this module. So like lots of documentation and examples. Whether it's going to be maintained, so make sure you mention who you are, and like how to like do stuff with your module, on what the sort of release schedule is, maybe some of the goals you have for the project, and whether it's reliable enough to use in production. You can do that by putting like links to Travis or like or Java's test or some kind of CI thing that's running your test automatically. Just stick all this information in your README so that people are reassured that this module is something they can rely on in production. So, as a few examples. Well, this is meant to come out one at a time, sorry about that. But the first one is, the most important thing to have in your README is API documentation. You can't just give people the code and expect them to read your source code and figure out how your module works. That is not cool. That is really rude, first of all, because they're doing a job just like you and they have no time. So make sure you have lots of documentation for the most common use cases, and examples too. Examples showing like, what could this module be used in? And modules can be used in many different ways. So you need to give them different ways that they can use them, so they can copy and paste it into their code and make sure that it works. I mean, that's the first thing I do when I see a module. I just copy and paste the example, and I debug it and see what kind of the output is of all the different objects. So yeah, put that in, and make sure that your examples are in JavaScript. Do not write your examples in CoffeeScript. Again, this is opinion. This is one I hold very, very, very closely. It is, CoffeeScript is fine. If you like CoffeeScript, that's great, and I'm happy for you. But the vast majority of the people using the module are going to be JavaScript developers, not CoffeeScript developers. So you have to think about them. By all means, put both, but there has to be at least a JavaScript example, because people are not going to be understanding you. Unless, of course, you want to exclude the JavaScript people, in which case that's fine. That's up to you. But seriously, it makes it hard for everybody else. A changelog is useful. So a lot of people like to think that Git acts as a changelog. It doesn't, because well, as an example, this is a Git commit that I found on commit requests or commit logs from lastnight.com. Like, this is the kind of stuff we put in our commits. You don't lie to yourself. This is what you guys write. I do this all the time. Maybe not at work, but like in side projects for sure. You have to write proper change logs, and this is really simple. Every time you do a release, just write what you changed in that release and put your date next to it and put the version. I'll get more to that into that a little bit later. Also, how to test your code is useful. If you have tests, that's really great. I mean, I would say do put tests into your module if you're going to open source it, because it makes it easier for people to make sure that they haven't broken anything. And make sure you put in something in the README about how to do it. And the most common way is to use npm tests. So you just go into your package.json file, go into the script area and type in the test bit, how to run your tests, and it can be like Mocha, or it can be a grok file or something. Make sure it's easy for people to do that, because then when they've written some code that's added some new features and they want to make a pull request on your repo, they can just type npm test and everything's green. They're like, yes, I haven't broken anything. How to compile it is important, especially if you're targeting a browser. If you have like a make file or like a gulp file or whatever you use to run your browser-fly things to compile it, and maybe they don't use common.js in their project, so they just need to kind of bring in the compiled code. You need to make sure that they know how to do that. This is another really important one. These are all really important. That's why they're on the list. And finally, how to contribute. So if you're like me and you like making other people do work for you, then you want to make sure they know how to do that work. I'm being facetious, obviously. I don't just want people to do my work for me, but it really helps. When I go to a new module that I'm kind of wanting to contribute to, like just this afternoon, I was trying to contribute to a PSD parser, which is written in JavaScript. And there weren't any information about contributing. There were like 2 tests. It was kind of disappointing. So I just had to go in there and write the stuff and make a pull request finally. And I really like it when someone says, like, make sure, first of all, you stick to this style guide, because otherwise I will reject the pull request. And make sure you run these tests and write this level of testing and stuff. It just makes things a bit easier for anyone who, if you're taking pull requests seriously, and you want to make sure that everything is kept stylistically homogeneous, it's useful to have a contribution guide. And in the contribution guide, you can also put things like, maybe I don't want to add this feature. Like, you might get a lot of feature requests for your module, like common ones that maybe you're never going to add. You should put that sort of thing in there as well, so you don't waste people's time when they come to your module and they're like, yeah, I want to add this new function or whatever. Yeah, that's kind of helpful as well. Oh, and finally, write it in Markdown. This is probably really obvious. I'm sure everyone does this these days. But I've seen a few readmes that are readme.txt. That's just so 1990s. Use Markdown. It makes it so much more readable. Everyone is putting their code more or less on GitHub, and if you're not, it's going to end up in NPM anyway, and NPM uses Markdown. So when people want to go to your modules to the landing page, they want to be able to read how to use it. It's much easier to read in Markdown because headers. Yeah. Now, dependency management. This is more of a technical subject. So, you know when you're installing a module, right, and it's like, this is definitely going to work, and all the tests agree, and it all kind of looks like it's working, but then you start using it and there's some kind of error with some other module or something, and you don't really know what's going on, and you go to the issues and there's no issues about it. That's usually because they didn't do npm shrink wrap. So, who's heard of npm shrink wrap? Okay, maybe about 40% of you? That's pretty good. I was expecting a few people, because maybe I'm just basing this on myself, but I only learned about npm shrink wrap. I think someone in the audience talked about it in like October last year at this conference. But it's the coolest thing, because I sound like a massive nerd, but it is a really cool thing. Package.json, as you may know, you get this list of dependencies, like requests and version 2.42.0, or anything that's compatible with version 2.42.0. And that's all well and good if the developer of that dependency is strictly adhering to the rules of semantic version, which we'll get into in a second. But if they're not, and so they upgrade to a new version of their module and it breaks some changes, but it doesn't say that it's incompatible with the version that you've got to rely on, then your code could break in a big way, in a way that you don't understand. So npm shrink wrap will basically lock down those dependencies in a whole different file, and then whenever npm installs one inside of your module or for your module, it'll get specifically that version from npm. Because npm keeps like a list, like a history of every single version within reason of all the modules ever. So it's really useful just to making sure that your code is completely stable no matter who's installing it when at the versions that they want to install at. So I would hugely recommend that when you are publishing a module, do an npm shrink wrap before you do so. It will make your users a lot happier in the future when someone screws up things. There was a recent example, but I'll get to it in a second actually, because we're going to go on to versioning in a second. And another thing about npm shrink wrap, it won't shrink wrap your dev dependencies by default, so you've got to put a -- dev in there. Maybe most of the time you don't care too much about breaking dev dependencies, but if you do, if for some reason people are going to be installing uploading your module lots from the source, then you should do this. If anyone is like massively confused by the way of anything I'm saying, because I'm going probably into a few things that maybe some of you haven't seen before, you really confused, raise your hand and tell me to shut up and explain that again, okay? npm prune is another good command to run before publishing your things, because it will get rid of any modules that you've got in your node modules folder that you haven't already saved the dependency for. And this is important because when you do npm shrink wrap, and you've got lots of modules that you've installed, maybe you just type npm install, like, you know, cheese grater, and it's put it in your node module, in your node modules folder, but you didn't save it. That's going to get in the way when you do npm shrink wrap, because it's going to be like, I don't know whether to put this in shrink wrap.json or not. So running npm prune will just get rid of all that crap, and it saves a bit of space on your hard drive as well, which is nice. It's nice to do some house cleaning every now and then. And then on the flip side, if you have some things that you forgot to save, but you do want to keep them, like you put them in your code in require blocks, in the require function anywhere inside your code, you can install this require analyzer tool. I'm pointing at my screen. You can perform the install require analyzer tool and run it in your project. It will basically just kind of go through all of your files, find all the requirements that you've got which aren't currently in package.json, and then add them to package.json for you, which is really nice. Although this, I only discovered this thing a few days ago, and it is kind of, this tool, a bit out of date. It works fine, but just be wary of it because it hasn't been changed in like 2 years, so it might be eventually breaking, especially when we start moving towards sort of like ES6 style things, and using ES6 modules instead of ES5 modules, or ES5 modules. Next, versioning. Any questions at this point? Or criticisms about my methods? Or just an excuse to have a cheeky beer break? Right, versioning. I know that a lot of people here are going to be like, Semver, oh, not another lecture about Semver, but just to make sure we're on the same page, and I love talking about Semver because it's the greatest thing in the world. Semantic versioning makes sure, basically, that everyone sticks to a strict way of making sure the dependencies can be kept. What's the word? I used it like 5 minutes ago. Compatible, yeah. So the way that, here's how it works. You've got 3 numbers in versions. You've got the major, minor, and patch numbers. The first one is the major one, and it basically says that if you increment this on the version of your package or your module or whatever, then it is incompatible with the previous version of your module. The minor one, for example, examples. Generate talk becomes write boolean talk. So anyone using version 1.2.3, which have generate talk on it, and they upgrade to version 2, they're going to have to change their code because that's now write boolean talk. So having Semver and having like that version 1 in their package.json ensures that they won't automatically be upgraded to version 2. They have to manually do that themselves, and it prevents these breaking changes from happening. A minor version is what happens when you add a backwards compatible change, like a new function which no one is using if they depend on your code yet. And a patch is for like bug fix or whatever, or some refactoring, which is always going to be, ideally, always going to be backwards compatible. If you do bug fix which isn't backwards compatible, then, new version. New major version, that is. Anyway, that's Semver. It's really useful. If you want more information, just search Semver. There's like a big website about it. There's so much more to it than this. Well, not that much more, but there's more, but this is the main stuff. This is the thing you need to know. And the great thing about Semver, or the great thing about NPM, I should say, is that NPM, our beautiful package manager and fantastic tool that we use every day and rely on for all of our work, and if it went down, I don't know what the fuck we do, uses semantic versioning. That's the kind of the rule that everyone has to adhere to. So if you have a package on NPM, you should be using semantic versioning. Oh shit, yeah, I forgot. This is the sort of build up to this bit. If you were to increment your version, right, so this is what you might do if you didn't know what I'm about to tell you. You go to package.json, you find a version string, and then you increment it and make a git commit for the incremental thing you just did. And then you make a git tag, so that your GitHub users can find snapshots of your code at that specific version, right, which is a really useful thing to do. I don't know if you've ever tried downloading tarbles from GitHub. They kind of work on the idea that, because there's one for each version, they're basically letting people making tags, which is nice. Anyway, that's kind of a lengthy process because you have to type loads of things and go to lots of files. You could use npm version, which is another really great tool that npm has in it, and it works like this. You just type npm version into terminal or command or whatever you use, bash. npm version, and then you say major, minor, or patch, depending on what kind of increment you want to do. And then you can put a M flag, just like with git commit, and that's the message that will be sent to your GitHub repository, or sorry, your Git repository, with that version you commit, which is nice. It's just sort of, basically it just does the three things that were on the previous slide in one go. It will increment the version for you at exactly the right amount. It will make a message, sorry, the commit with a message, and it will make a tag for you. And then you do a git push, and you do a git push tags, and then it's all done. Which is really, really helpful. And I mean, it's really weird, but this is a very satisfying command. I type this and I'm like, yes, version done. I can't, it's just like kind of, I don't know, it's very, very visceral. So yeah, with all that in mind, if you have a node module and you want to publish it, well, this is how I do it. This is the checklist I go through. I mean, actually, I didn't have a literal checklist until I wrote this talk, and I realized that I had one, but I wasn't really following it, but I might print it out now in this kind of. First of all, you just have the next version. Just get it in your mind, you know, figure out what the next version of your module is going to be. Is it going to be 0.24.0, or is it going to be 0.23.4, or is it maybe going to be version 1, because you finally decided to ruin your users' lives and break all the things. Once you figure that out, put it in your mind and update the change log a little bit. Put in a new entry saying what this version is adding, because it's useful for your users to have a change log so they can figure out where it is that you fucked up their code, and they can go back to before that moment. And make it a little bit descriptive, but not too much. Just kind of give a high-level overview of what it is you added. And this is the kind of thing that will force you to be more like granular with your changes, rather than, I mean, this is from experience. You know, when I first started using Git and stuff, I would end up just kind of going, I've just done a whole day's of work, I'm going to make a commit now. This kind of practice makes you be more specific about your commits, and make sure you do commits for specific things and release new versions when specific use case is done, which is a nice thing to do because it means people don't get screwed over too much when they're using your code. Next, we make sure that the dependencies are locked down. So we use npm prune to make sure that we don't have any random extraneous modules that we haven't saved in package.json. We use require analyzer to make sure that we have all of the right things that we haven't put into no modules or into package.json. And then we can do a shrink wrap to make sure that anyone downloading our code will get the right versions of the dependencies, which is pretty easy. Next thing is to browserify and logify your code if you want to target all of our friends on the front end, and why not? Because your code probably works fine. Put it into like a folder in your repo called dist or bin or something. Actually, don't put it in bin, put it in dist. Dist is better. This is one of the things I kind of thought of in the last minute. But yeah, put the browserified code somewhere nice that's obvious for the front end user to find. Commit the changes in their own commit line, just kind of clean up free version, whatever thingy. And then run npm version. It'll do its magic with the version number, the commits, and the tags. And then you can push to GitHub. And finally, npm publish. And you're done. And it's a very nice feeling to have done that. And of course, seconds later, you realize you've got one crucial thing, and you have to make a new version. But the more you do this, the easier it gets. And another cool thing about npm publish is npm's API has something hooked up to some kind of Twitter bot, so it'll kind of tweet out something whenever there's a new version of your module. So if you put your Twitter handle somewhere in the name of the module or in the description, that might end up on Twitter being tweeted out to 1,000 people. So just to be there, if you want to get some new Twitter followers. Anyway, that's automatic. But this is all sort of the technical things. There's more to this than just a few technical things, though, in my opinion. There's the soft element of it as well. The moment you kind of start open sourcing your code and releasing it to the world and saying advertising it and saying, okay, I want people to use this and see what it's like, and I want you to contribute to it and make it better, you're kind of making a community around that thing, whether you like it or not. And the important thing to remember about this community is that they are real people who have real feelings, and they have actually put some real, actual time into not just kind of writing code for your project, but thinking about trying it out, writing issues, figuring out what's wrong with it, figuring out what's right about it. And I think it's important to remember that behind the screen there is another person who's putting a lot of work into it. Maybe not as much as you, but enough that it's worth recognizing. So, to make them feel a bit more included, what I like to do is to publicly recognize their contributions. I have a contributors.md file in one of my projects, and then another one I have just a list of contributors at the bottom of the README. I've got a little link to their GitHub profile. I know this sounds like slightly shallow kind of stuff, but the truth is people like being recognized for their work. I know I do, maybe some of you don't care about it as much, but I think it's nice to recognize people for things they've contributed. So, just put a little, link to their GitHub profile so that other people can see the things that they've done, maybe like, hey, I like this module as well, I might contribute to that, and blah, blah, blah. And then another thing is to put them in the change log. If you're putting a log of changes, say if they were the sole person responsible for adding this great new function, it's probably worth mentioning them. And that's happened, half of the change logs in my most contributed to module are actually other people, which somehow feels a little bit embarrassing, but it also kind of feels really cool. And it just makes it feel really good to make people feel a bit included about this sort of thing. Like this, I felt pretty bad actually, because I've done this really well with all the people who contributed, but one time this guy, he changed some stuff in the README and made some better examples, and it was really great. And he was like, hey, don't forget to put me in the country. I was like, yeah, totally will. I was on holiday, so I replied by GitHub and then by Gmail. And 2 months later, he's like, you still haven't added me to the contributors. And I felt horrible, because this guy was just waiting. This is one of his first contributions to open source, and I just totally let him down. I know it's not really a big deal, but it probably was a much bigger deal for him than it was for me. So yeah, it's nice to just kind of make sure you do this. It doesn't take much more than 2 seconds to add someone's name to a file. And you can do it all in GitHub anyway, so. Yeah, another thing which is related, just respond as quickly as possible to people's issues and pull requests. It doesn't mean you have to sort of go in there, read the entire thing, look at all the code. Just telling them that you've seen it is really useful, so they're not being ignored, especially in modules which haven't been maintained in ages, but they really want to fix. They might be like, I'm not sure if this is ever going to get fixed, and they might have a manager reading down their name, why isn't this file upload working? It's well, it's the module that's broken, and the guy, I messaged him, and it's nice just to let them know that you've seen it, and either you're going to fix it, or you're not going to fix it, if you can give that kind of level of detail. But the most important thing, I think, is just to tell them that you've seen it, at least. Yeah, and improving community contributions is another good, big one. Some people aren't as anal about this sort of thing as I am, but I like style to be maintained. I'm not very good at confronting people about it, because if they make a pull request and it's oh, this isn't how I write it, I kind of I pull it down, I fix it a little bit, and then I merge it after I've done that. But there's a good argument to say maybe you should just say oh, just can you change this little thing, because it's easier possibly for them, especially if they're going to start making regular contributions, to start writing in the house style, as it were. So you could either put it in the contributing file, just kind of say oh, make sure that we're not doing we're doing trailing commas rather than leading commas. We're doing semicolons. We're putting our brackets after the thing. Don't do that. And we're doing strict mode or whatever. You could do that, or you could put a JS hint RC file in the project, and if they use JS hint, then they'll be told off whenever they do something wrong. But it is useful to sort of make it clear in the contributing file. If there is a house style, then tell them what it is. If you're not that bothered, then that's fine. But yeah, it's useful to put that sort of thing in there. And also tell them honestly if what they're doing is wrong, or if the thing that they're doing or contributing is not something that you want in your project. People may be hurt, but the majority of the time they're not going to, because this is just code at the end of the day. It's not like a personal attack, or at least it shouldn't be. If someone makes a feature request or a pull request and they're this is not the direction I want my project to be heading in, you just say, thanks for your contribution, but this is not what we're looking for, this is not what the project needs right now. Or if there's some things that are a little bit wrong, just kind of point out what those things are and ask them to fix it. The most important thing is people like, grateful, and be prepared to debate, because people like to debate on the internet, as you know. I see you're trying to get me to finish, but I'm going to start the way. Finally, if you are losing interest, or there are lots of issues and you're getting bored, or overworked, or maybe you're just this is not what I thought it would be, it's not fun anymore, because it is meant to be fun, I think, if you're getting involved in open source, or at least kind of contributing to something bigger, then you need to find someone else to take over if it's a project that a lot of people depend on. So you could go and look at your previous contributors, if you have any, and say like, hey guys, I don't want to do like full-time maintenance on this thing, take it over, and like hand it over to them. Or maybe ask on Hacker News or Reddit or the LNUG GitHub channel is probably a good place to look as well. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but it probably would be a good place to go. It's better that, it's better that the project is properly maintained with the help of other people than to kind of wither and die under your sole ownership, which would be really sad if it's something that a lot of people like and a lot of people use. So don't let that happen. I saw a talk by this guy called Fat once, who is famous for creating Bootstrap, and he talks about, he made it really dramatic, but he talked about like this kind of burnout he had, like a 2-week-long bender, when he got over the top pull requests and issues from Bootstrap, and he just kind of eventually just said like, fuck it, put the table and like left it to someone else at Twitter to deal with. And I never want to be in that situation. I mean, I love the idea of having a really popular GitHub project that's kind of constantly evolving and getting better and better thanks to the contributions of people, but I don't want it to be like, eating away at my soul, like this guy. So I think it's important just to sort of make sure you know when it's time to stop. And finally, just be nice to everybody, because, again, they're real people, and we're all trying to have a good time. So if someone's a dick, don't be a dick back to them, just be nice, and maybe they'll be nice to you. And that is all for my talk. Good luck with the modules. Thank you so much for Alan Davis. I forgot what JK Bits is one name. Who is JK Bits 1? Raise your hand, please. Hey, that's you.
Yeah.
So, what's your name?
Okay.
John, thank you so much for your contribution and your feedback. And Ross, the guy in the States. I hope you've enjoyed my little kind of opinionations.
Questions?
Nice. Any questions? Or Vance, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think there's one really important point, which is giving your module a really cool and memorable name.
Oh yeah, good point. Okay. Do you mind if I show a couple of names and just kind of...
If you're on the talk generator, I was going to suggest LNUG.
As in spelled nugget or nugget? Like with an E or an I? That's good.
I think nuggets are gold.
I'm going to do that. I'm going to use that. Any more ideas, please let me know. Any more questions? Yes.
On the point of adding people to the contributors list when they make a great feature, would you normally do that for helping out on issues and things like that as well, or mostly for code contributions?
I would say mostly code contributions. But if they point out a really big bug or something, maybe I've never recognized them for an issue raised. To be honest, maybe I did. I'm not sure.
Anyone else?
Anyone else? Oh, nuggets. Nice.
Hi there. So Node.js is often used within kind of production environments and within companies as well. I was just wondering if some of the rules, the kind of breakpoints you come up with, do you think a lot of them, I think so as well, but do you think a lot of them will be applicable as well to kind of an enterprise environment where people own pieces of code rather than being open source?
Yeah, definitely, yes. Especially when, and this, a lot of these things, by the way, apply to basically every programming language, any big project, or even small projects where you've got a lot of people working on them. Yes, it's important, especially to have things like READMEs and good examples, because especially in an enterprise environment, you're going to have a lot of turnover of stuff, and maybe a lot of contractors coming in and out, and they want to get started as quick as possible. So having this kind of information there is really useful. Maybe not such a big deal for the sort of like recognizing contributions. That's a nice thing to do, but I don't think it's crucial for the business. But yeah, maybe that's a nice thing to do, maybe, yeah.
And then when your module becomes really big, you can have more helping too, like contributors, like official ones.
Yeah,
that can help you out. And then people do like podcasts, they do newsletters, it's kind of like tons of tools. Like that's the next level though, isn't it? Like when the module is really, really kind of popular.
And then you're like a celebrity or something, right? Yeah. Then you're Michael Rogers of your fat or whatever.
Yep.
And yeah.
And then you quit like TJ Horowitz, because it's like. Yeah. Well, thank you, Don. That was
Thank you very much for your attention, guys. Have a good one.
Okay, so now we have forms.